Welcome back, my friends. Today, we are going to listen to the emotional story of the Titanic and the city that remembered its victims. This is not only a story about a famous ship, it is also a story about pride, hope, fear, silence, rescue, loss, and memory. More than 100 years have passed since the Titanic sank in the cold waters of the North Atlantic. But people still talk about it. They still read about it. They still visit museums, graves, and memorials. They still ask the same question: how could such a great ship disappear on its first voyage? The Titanic was not an ordinary ship. At the time, it was one of the largest and most luxurious passenger ships in the world. It was built during an age when people believed strongly in technology, engineering, and progress. Large machines were changing the world. Trains moved across countries. Factories grew. Cities became bigger. Steamships crossed oceans and connected continents. For many people, the Titanic represented the power of the modern age. It was not just transportation. It was a symbol of human confidence. When people saw the Titanic, they saw size and beauty. The ship had tall funnels, shining lights, elegant rooms, wide decks, and powerful engines. Wealthy passengers could enjoy fine dining, beautiful staircases, comfortable cabins, music, and social life. For them, the ship was almost like a floating palace. But the Titanic also carried many people in second class and third class. Some were families, some were workers, some were immigrants hoping to begin a new life in North America. For them, the ship was not only luxury, it was hope. This is one reason the Titanic story still feels so human. On board, there were people from different countries, different classes, and different dreams. Some were rich and famous. Some were ordinary men, women, and children. Some had paid for comfort. Others had saved money for a small space below. But when the ship entered the dark Atlantic night, all of them were together on the same ocean. Their lives were moving toward the same disaster. Even though most of them did not know it, the Titanic left Southampton, England, on April 10th, 1912. It stopped in France and Ireland before crossing the Atlantic toward New York. The voyage should have been a celebration of modern travel. Newspapers were interested. Passengers were excited. Families waved goodbye. The ship moved into open water. With confidence, it seemed strong, safe, and impressive. Many people believed that such a ship was almost impossible to sink. That belief would later become one of the most tragic parts of the story. But the North Atlantic can be dangerous. It can be beautiful in the daytime, with wide water and endless sky. But at night, it can become cold, dark, and silent. Icebergs can drift through the water like white mountains. They may look still, but they are deadly. Most of an iceberg is hidden below the surface. A ship can see only part of the danger. This makes ice especially frightening. What you cannot see can be more dangerous than what you can see. As the Titanic crossed the Atlantic, it received warnings about ice. This was not unusual for ships in that region during that season. But the Titanic continued moving. The ship was strong. The weather seemed calm. The ocean surface was unusually still. That stillness may have made the danger harder to see, because waves breaking against an iceberg can help reveal it. On the night of April 14th, 1912, the Titanic moved through cold darkness toward its most famous moment before the disaster. Life on board continued. Some passengers talked, read, walked, ate, or prepared for sleep. In first class, the rooms were warm and elegant. In third class, families rested after long days of travel. Crew members worked through the night. The engines kept pushing the ship forward. Outside, the sea was dark. The stars were bright. The air was cold. It was the kind of night that could seem peaceful, but that peace was hiding danger. Then came the iceberg. The warning was sudden. The ship tried to turn, but it was too late. The Titanic struck the ice on its side. At first, some passengers did not understand how serious it was. The collision did not feel like a huge explosion. Some felt a strange movement. Some heard a scraping sound. Some came out of their rooms confused. A few pieces of ice even fell onto the deck. For a short time, the disaster did not look like the end of the ship. But deep below, water began to enter. This is where confidence became fear. The Titanic had watertight compartments, but the damage opened too many of them. Slowly, the truth became clear. The ship was going to sink. Lifeboats were prepared. Passengers were told to come up. Some obeyed quickly. Some hesitated. Some did not believe the ship could really go down. This delay cost precious time. In a crisis, disbelief can be dangerous. People often need time to accept that the impossible is really happening. The Titanic did not have enough lifeboats for everyone on board. This fact became one of the most painful lessons of the disaster. The ship followed the rules of its time, but the rules were not enough. Many lifeboats left before they were full. Confusion, class barriers, fear, and poor planning made the situation worse. As the ship tilted lower into the water, the night became filled with sounds, orders, footsteps, crying, steam, music, prayers, and the cold movement of the sea. But this story does not end only in the ocean. It also reaches Canada after the Titanic sank. Ships from Halifax, Nova Scotia, played an important role in recovering victims from the North Atlantic. Halifax became deeply connected to the memory of the disaster. Many victims were brought there. Some were identified. Some were never fully known. Some were buried in Halifax cemeteries. Because of this, the Titanic is not only a story of a ship sailing from Europe to America, it is also part of Canadian history. This is the first lesson from the Titanic story. Human confidence can build amazing things, but confidence without humility can become dangerous. The Titanic showed the beauty of engineering, but also the limits of human control. The ocean was stronger than pride. The cold night was stronger than luxury. And after the lights went out, what remained was memory. In the next part, we will step onto the ship before the disaster. We will look at life on board, from the richest passengers to the immigrants, hoping for a new beginning. Because before the Titanic became a tragedy, it was full of living people, private dreams, and ordinary moments. Before the Titanic became a symbol of tragedy, it was a ship full of life. People walked through its halls, ate meals, wrote letters, talked with strangers, listened to music, and dreamed about the future. Today, when we hear the name Titanic, we often think first about the iceberg and the sinking. But for the passengers on board, the ship was not a tragedy yet. It was a journey. It was a new beginning. It was a few days at sea before life changed forever. The Titanic carried people from many different backgrounds. Some passengers were very wealthy. They traveled in first class and enjoyed some of the finest spaces on the ship. Their rooms were comfortable, Their dining areas were beautiful. They could walk on elegant staircases, sit in reading rooms, smoke in private lounges, and enjoy meals that felt more like a grand hotel than a ship. For them, crossing the Atlantic was not only transportation, it was style, status, and comfort. First-class passengers lived in a world of confidence. Many believed that modern technology had made ocean travel safer and more comfortable than ever before. The Titanic seemed to prove that idea. It had electric lights, powerful engines, large public rooms, and a feeling of luxury. A passenger could almost forget that the ship was moving through cold ocean water. Inside, there was warmth, music, food, conversation, and beauty. Outside, there was darkness, distance, and risk. Second-class passengers had less luxury, but many still traveled in good conditions compared with older ships. Teachers, business people, religious workers, professionals, and families could be found there. Their rooms were simpler, but still respectable. They could eat in dining areas, balcon decks, read, talk, and enjoy the voyage. For many second-class passengers, the Titanic was impressive. Even if they did not have the grandest rooms, they were part of a modern journey across the Atlantic. Third-class passengers had a very different experience. Many were immigrants traveling to North America for a better life. Some were going to the United States. Some hoped for work, land, family reunion, or a fresh start. They did not travel for luxury. They traveled for possibility. Their cabins were smaller. Their spaces were more crowded. Their movement around the ship was more limited. But compared with many earlier ships, third class on the Titanic was still considered better than what many travelers had known before. Imagine a family in third class. They carry bags, clothes, papers, and small personal items. Maybe they have saved money for a long time. Maybe they have said goodbye to relatives they may never see again. The ship is large and strange. Different languages are heard in the halls. Children are excited. Parents are tired. Everyone is moving toward a place they hope will give them more opportunity. For these people, the Titanic was not a famous ship yet. It was a bridge between an old life and a new one. The crew worked constantly to keep the ship moving. Officers watched the sea. Engineers worked below decks near the engines. Firemen shoveled coal in hot and difficult conditions. Stewards served meals, cleaned rooms, answered questions, and helped passengers. Wireless operators sent and received messages. Lookouts watched from high above. The Titanic looked elegant to passengers, but behind that elegance was hard labor. A great ship needed hundreds of people working together. Below the beautiful rooms, the engine spaces were loud, hot, and powerful. Coal was burned to produce steam. The engines pushed the ship across the ocean. The men who worked there did not see the voyage the same way first-class passengers did. They worked in heat and noise, while cold water waited outside the hull. Their labor made the luxury possible. This contrast is part of the Titanic story. Above, there was music and fine dining. Below, there was sweat, fire, and machinery. During the day, passengers walked on deck and looked at the sea. The Atlantic seemed endless. The sky could be clear and bright. The water could appear calm. People talked about arrival in New York. Some wrote letters or postcards. Some made friends. Some enjoyed the novelty of being on such a famous ship. The voyage had a sense of excitement. Many people believed they were part of something historic, but not in the way history would later remember it. At night, the Titanic became even more beautiful. Lights glowed across the decks and windows. Music could be heard in some areas. People dressed for dinner. Conversations continued. The ship moved through darkness like a floating city. But the beauty of the ship also created a dangerous feeling: safety. When something looks strong, warm, and bright, people may forget how fragile life can be. The ocean did not care how expensive the ship was. Ice did not care how famous the ship was. Nature was silent, patient, and powerful. Class differences also shaped the disaster before it even happened. The Titanic was designed with separate spaces for different classes. Passengers did not all move freely in the same areas. This reflected the society of the time. Wealth, status, and nationality affected how people traveled and how they were treated. When the emergency came, these divisions would matter. Some people were closer to lifeboats. Some understood instructions faster. Some had better access to open decks. Others faced confusion, distance, language barriers, and blocked routes. This is one of the most painful parts of the Titanic story. The disaster did not happen to a single group in the same way. It affected everyone, but not equally. The rich, the poor, the crew, the immigrants, the women, the men, the children, and the families all face different chances and different obstacles. A ship can carry everyone across the same ocean, but society can still divide people even in danger. Before the iceberg, there were warnings. Messages about ice reached the ship. Some warnings were passed along. Some were not treated with enough urgency. The Titanic was moving through a region where ice was a real danger, but the voyage continued. The sea looked calm. The ship seemed strong. The night seemed peaceful. That peace made the coming disaster even more haunting. This is the second lesson from the Titanic story. History is not only made of big moments, it is made of ordinary lives before those moments arrive. Before the Titanic sank, people were eating, sleeping, working, laughing, worrying, hoping, and dreaming. That is why the story still moves us. It was not only a ship that went down, it was a world of human lives, suddenly broken in the middle of the sea. And as the passengers settled into another cold Atlantic night, most of them had no idea that the most important hours of their lives were about to begin. On the night of April 14th, 1912, the Titanic was moving through the cold North Atlantic. The sky was clear. The stars were bright. The sea was unusually calm. At first, this sounds like good weather for a ship. But that calm water created a hidden danger. When waves hit an iceberg, white water can form around it. That white movement can help lookouts see the ice in the dark. But on that night, the ocean was almost flat. The iceberg could blend into the darkness until the ship was dangerously close. The Titanic had already received warnings about ice. Other ships in the area had reported icebergs and field ice. This was not impossible to understand. The North Atlantic in spring could be dangerous. Ice could drift south from colder waters. Ships crossing between Europe and North America had to be careful. But the Titanic continued forward. The ship was large, modern, and powerful. Many people trusted its design. Many believed it could survive almost anything. That confidence made the coming disaster even more tragic. High above the deck, the lookouts watched the darkness. They had an important job. Their eyes were the first defense against danger, but the night made their work difficult. There was no moonlight bright enough to reveal everything clearly. The water was dark. The air was cold. The ship was moving quickly. Then, suddenly, the shape appeared. An iceberg was directly ahead. The warning came fast. The bridge received the message. Orders were given. The ship tried to turn. The engines were adjusted. But the Titanic was enormous. A ship that large could not stop or turn, like a small boat. The iceberg scraped along the starboard side. It did not cut the ship open in one giant dramatic hole like many people imagine. Instead, the damage happened along several areas below the waterline. The effect was deadly. Water began entering the ship. At first, many passengers did not understand what had happened. Some felt a strange vibration. Some heard a grinding sound. Some noticed the engine stop. A few people came out to ask questions. Some even saw pieces of ice on the deck and treated them with curiosity. The ship was still bright. The rooms were still warm. The music and conversations had only recently faded. Nothing looked like the end of the world. That is one of the frightening things about the Titanic disaster. For a short time, danger was real. But belief had not caught up with reality. Below decks, the truth was clearer. Water was coming in. The ship's compartments were flooding. The Titanic had watertight doors and compartments, but the damage affected too many sections. The ship could stay afloat if only a smaller number of compartments flooded, but too many had been opened to the sea. The mathematics of survival turned against the ship. The Titanic was going to sink. Captain Edward Smith and the officers faced a terrible situation. They had to prepare passengers, sound distress messages, uncover lifeboats, and create order in a crisis that many people still did not believe. Wireless operators sent calls for help into the night. The letters C, Q, D, and later SOS traveled across the air. Ships nearby and far away received messages. The Carpathia began moving toward the Titanic, but it was too far away to arrive in time to save everyone before the sinking. Passengers were told to put on life jackets and come to the boat deck. Some obeyed. Some hesitated. Some returned to their cabins for warmer clothes or valuables. Some thought the lifeboats looked more dangerous than staying on the large, bright ship. This is easy to understand. Imagine standing on a cold deck at night. Beside you is a huge ship full of lights. Below you is a small lifeboat hanging over black water. Which feels safer? Many people chose the ship. At least at first, the lifeboats became one of the greatest tragedies of the night. There were not enough for everyone. Even worse, some lifeboats left before they were full. Officers were trying to follow orders, manage fear, and load women and children first. But the process was confused. Some passengers did not want to enter. Some crew members worried that the boats might break if filled too heavily before lowering. Some areas of the ship received instructions more clearly than others. Time was lost, and every minute mattered. As the bow sank lower, the angle of the ship changed. The disaster became impossible to deny. People could see the forward part of the ship dipping toward the sea. The cold became sharper. Fear spread. Families were separated. Husbands said goodbye to wives. Parents held children. Crew members continued working. Some passengers prayed. Some waited quietly. Some tried to find a place in a boat. Others knew they might not survive. The band is one of the most remembered parts of the Titanic story. Musicians reportedly played as the ship was sinking, helping calm passengers during the final hours. The exact final song is debated, but the image remains powerful. Music in the cold darkness, while one of the greatest ships in the world slowly disappeared. Whether every detail is perfect or not, the meaning is clear. In moments of fear, people still look for dignity, comfort, and courage. The final minutes were terrifying. The stern rose higher as the bow went down. Objects fell. Lights flickered. The great ship, once a symbol of human power, was breaking under the pressure of the sea. Then the Titanic disappeared beneath the water. After the noise came something worse. The cries of people in the freezing ocean. The water was so cold that many could not survive long. Lifeboats floated nearby. But fear and confusion kept many from returning quickly enough. This is the third lesson from the Titanic story. A disaster is not only one moment. It is a chain of decisions, delays, beliefs, and conditions. Ice warnings, speed, darkness, calm water, limited lifeboats, confusion, and human disbelief all came together. The iceberg struck the ship, but the tragedy was larger than the iceberg. It was also about confidence, preparation, and the painful difference between rules and real safety. In the cold North Atlantic, the Titanic was gone, but the story was not over. Survivors waited in lifeboats under the dark sky. A rescue ship was coming, and far away, Halifax would soon become part of the memory of the people who did not return. After the Titanic disappeared beneath the cold Atlantic water, the night became painfully quiet. The great ship was gone. The lights were gone. The music was gone. What remained were lifeboats floating in darkness, survivors shaking from cold and fear, and many people still in the water. For those who survived, the hours after the sinking were almost impossible to forget. They were no longer passengers on the most famous ship in the world. They were people waiting in small boats, surrounded by a freezing sea, listening for help. The rescue ship Carpathia was on its way, but it could not arrive instantly. When the Titanic sent distress messages, the Carpathia changed course and moved as fast as it could through the night. But the ocean was wide, and time was cruel. Survivors in lifeboats could see darkness in every direction. Some had lost family members. Some did not know who was alive. Some were too shocked to speak. Others cried, prayed, or stared at the water. The cold air made every minute feel longer. When the Carpathia finally reached the area, it began taking survivors on board. Imagine the scene. A lifeboat show comes close to the side of the rescue ship. People are weak, wet, cold, and exhausted. Some climb with help. Some are carried. Some look back at the ocean, still hoping to see someone they love. The Carpathia's crew gave blankets, warm drinks, medical help, and shelter. But no rescue could erase what had happened. The survivors had been saved from the sea, but they carried the memory of the disaster with them. The Carpathia took the survivors to New York. There, crowds waited for news. Families stood in fear. Reporters wanted names, stories, and answers. The world was shocked. The Titanic had been a symbol of progress, comfort, and modern engineering. Now it was at the bottom of the ocean. People wanted to know who survived, who died, and how such a disaster could happen. But while New York received the survivors, another city became deeply connected to those who did not survive. That city was Halifax, in Nova Scotia, Canada. Halifax was one of the closest major ports to the disaster area, with the resources needed for recovery work. After the sinking, ships from Halifax were sent into the North Atlantic to search for bodies. This was a difficult and heartbreaking task. The sea was cold. The distance was great. The work was emotionally heavy, The crews were not going to rescue living passengers anymore. They were going to recover the dead, identify them if possible, and bring them back with dignity. One of the recovery ships was the Mackay Bennett. Its crew sailed into the disaster area and found many victims. Some bodies could be identified by clothing, papers, jewelry, initials, personal objects, or physical details. Others could not be identified. The work had to be organized carefully. Each person became a record, a number, a description, and, when possible, a name. This was not only a practical job, it was a moral responsibility. The dead had families, they had stories, they deserved to be remembered. Halifax became the place where many Titanic victims were brought. Some were returned to families. Some were buried in Halifax cemeteries. The city became part of the disaster's memory because it cared for people who never reached their destination. In Halifax, the Titanic story became visible not through luxury rooms or famous photographs, but through graves, names, and quiet rows of markers. The tragedy became local. It became Canadian history. Fairview Lawn Cemetery is one of the most important places connected to this memory. Many Titanic victims were buried there. Walking through such a cemetery is very different from watching a movie or reading a headline. A grave makes the story personal. Each marker reminds us that the Titanic was not only a ship, it was a collection of human lives. Some names are known, some are unknown. Some were young, some were crew members, some were passengers. All of them were part of the same night. This Halifax connection gives the Titanic story a deeper emotional meaning for Canadian listeners. The ship was sailing across the Atlantic toward New York, but Canada became part of what happened after the sinking. Halifax helped recover, identify, bury, and remember the victims. The city became a place where grief had a physical home. Families could receive news. Records could be made. The dead could be treated with respect. Memory could be protected. The disaster also forced the world to ask serious questions. Why were there not enough lifeboats? Why were ice warnings not treated with more urgency? Why did some lifeboats leave before they were full? Why did class, language, and location affect people's chances? These questions were painful, but they were necessary. A tragedy becomes even worse if people learn nothing from it. This is the fourth lesson from the Titanic story. Rescue is not only about saving the living, it is also about honoring the dead and telling the truth. The Carpathia gave survivors a second chance. Halifax gave many victims dignity and memory. Together, these two parts show the human response after disaster. Help those who can still be saved, and remember those who cannot return. The Titanic sank in the North Atlantic, but its story did not stay there. It traveled to New York with the survivors. It traveled to Halifax with the victims. It traveled into newspapers, investigations, museums, cemeteries, books, and family memories. And from that tragedy, the world began to change the way it thought about safety at sea. After the Titanic disaster, the world could not look at ocean travel in the same way again. Before the sinking, many people believed that modern ships had become almost completely safe. The Titanic was large, powerful, and beautifully designed. It represented human progress. But after it disappeared beneath the cold North Atlantic, that confidence was broken. People realized that technology can fail, rules can be weak, and pride can become dangerous when it is not balanced by preparation. One of the biggest lessons was about lifeboats. The Titanic did not have enough lifeboats for everyone on board. This seems shocking today, but at the time, the rules were based more on the size of the ship than on the actual number of people it carried. The Titanic followed the legal requirements of its period, but the disaster proved that the requirements were not enough. A rule can be official and still be unsafe. After the sinking, maritime safety rules changed. Ships were expected to carry enough lifeboat space for everyone, not only for part of the people on board. The disaster also changed the way people thought about lifeboat drills. On the Titanic, many passengers were not fully prepared for an emergency. Some did not know where to go. Some did not understand how serious the situation was. Some were confused by instructions. In a crisis, confusion can cost lives. After Titanic, it became clearer that passengers and crew needed better emergency training. Lifeboats were not enough by themselves. People also needed clear procedures, practice, and leadership. Wireless communication became another important issue. The Titanic had wireless operators, and their distress messages helped bring the Carpathia to the rescue. But the disaster showed that ships needed stronger communication systems and better listening rules. A message can save lives only if it is heard in time. After the Titanic, the world paid more attention to constant radio watch, distress signals, and communication between ships. The ocean was still dangerous, but ships could no longer travel as if they were alone. Ice warnings also became more important. The Titanic had received warnings about ice, but the danger was not handled with enough caution. After the disaster, more effort was made to watch for ice in the North Atlantic and warn ships. This showed a simple but powerful lesson. Information is valuable only when people respect it. A warning is not just a message. It is a chance to change direction before it is too late. The Titanic disaster also changed public trust. People began asking hard questions about ship companies, safety rules, class differences, and responsibility. Why were there not enough lifeboats? Why did some boats leave partly empty? Why were some passengers closer to safety than others? Why did confidence remain so strong even after danger was known? These questions were painful, but they pushed society to improve. A tragedy should not only create sadness, it should create learning. But the Titanic story still moves people for another reason. It is not only about rules and ships, it is about human beings. It is about a mother holding her child, a husband saying goodbye, a crew member staying at his post, a musician playing in fear, a passenger looking at the cold water and understanding that life has changed forever. These moments make the story personal. We do not remember Titanic only because it was a famous ship. We remember it because it carried real people with real hopes. The ship also shows the contrast between human dreams and human limits. The Titanic was built to cross the ocean with power and beauty. It was filled with lights, music, food, cabins, engines, and confidence. But the ocean was larger. The ice was silent. The night was cold. In a few hours, the great symbol of modern progress became a reminder that nature does not respect human pride. This is why the story feels almost like a lesson from history itself. Halifax remains an important part of that memory. The city did not build the Titanic. It was not the destination of the ship. But after the disaster, Halifax became a place of recovery, burial, and remembrance. The graves there turned the story from a distant event into something quiet and real. A name on a stone can speak more strongly than a headline. It tells us that every number in a disaster is a person. Every person had a life before the final night. museums, cemeteries, books, films, and documentaries have kept the Titanic story alive. Sometimes people focus on the luxury of the ship. Sometimes they focus on the mystery. Sometimes they focus on the mistakes. But the deeper reason we return to Titanic is that it helps us think about life. It asks us what we trust. It asks us how we prepare. It asks us how people behave when time is running out. It asks us how the living should remember the dead. This is the final lesson from the Titanic story. Progress is powerful, but it must be humble. Safety rules matter. Warnings matter. Preparation matters. Human life matters more than speed, luxury, or reputation. The Titanic was called a wonder of its age, but its greatest legacy came after it sank. Because of the disaster, the world changed. Maritime safety, improved emergency thinking, and remembered the people who were lost. More than 100 years later, the Titanic still speaks to us. We can imagine the lights on the water, the cold wind, the quiet stars, the lifeboats drifting in the dark, and the city of Halifax receiving those who never reached New York. The ship is gone, but the story remains. It remains as a warning, a memory, and a human lesson from the North Atlantic. Thank you for listening to this story. Now, write one simple sentence in the comments. You can write, "I learned that the Titanic changed maritime safety and taught the world to respect the sea." Keep listening, keep learning, and I will see you in the next story.